Hi everyone, today I'll be showing you how to take a selfie you've taken and convert it into an Andy Warhol inspired graphic. So what I'm first going to do is I'm going to create a new document. So I'm going to hit File, New, make my size 650 by 650 to make us have a nice square, and then I'm going to hit Create. So now that I have this nice square in front of me, what I'm going to do is I'm going to click on the rectangle tool and I'm going to create a rectangle. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to hold Shift down on my keyboard and then click and drag to create a nice size square. So that's about the size that I want. And then I'm going to let it go. So now that I have this square on its own layer, I can move it wherever I'd like. But what I'm going to do is we're going to have 4 of them. So I'm going to have one here. Then I'm going to right click, duplicate this layer, have one here, right click, duplicate this layer, and move this down here. And then right click, duplicate this layer, and have one more. So now our spacing is a little off around this area. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to do my best to use these pink guidelines to create an equal amount of space between all these squares and the border. So we have a nice even field. All right, so I think that looks pretty good. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to hit File, Open, and find the selfie I've taken. So this is the selfie that I've taken of myself. So I'm going to drag it out. And then I'm going to hit unlock so I can move it. And then I'm going to drag and drop it onto our canvas and then close this. And I don't need to save because we don't need it anymore. So now I have my selfie right here. So from here, what I'm going to do is I'm going to drag it down right above the layer that I want to create a clipping mask to. And then I'm going to hit right click. And then I'm going to create a clipping mask. Now the problem is this image is not the right size. And you can't see what I'd like you to see. So what I'm going to do is on my keyboard, I'm going to hit Control T. And now these little boxes show up around where the image is. So what I'm going to do from here is I'm going to align the top corner with the box. And I'm going to pick one of the corners, remember the corners, hold down Shift on my keyboard, and then change the size to about the size that I want the image to be. And then, let's try that one more time. Hold down Shift, and then resize. All right, that seems like a good size. So I'm gonna align it with the box. Maybe I'm gonna make it a little smaller by holding Shift and then dragging the corner. And I'd say that looks pretty good. I like where that is, and I like the size of it. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to right click and copy this image layer. So I'm going to duplicate this layer, hit OK, and then move this right above the next box, and then create a new clipping mask on the next square. So right click, create clipping mask. And I'm going to do this 2 more times for the other 2 below. So right click, duplicate the layer, move it above the box, move the image, right click, create clipping mask. And then one last time, right click, duplicate the layer, move this layer above the square, move the actual image, and then right click, create clipping mask. Awesome, so now we have all 4 of our images within their respective squares. We like the size and we like where they're located. So now what our next step is going to be is we want to figure out how are we going to color these images in an interesting manner that sort of resembles Andy Warhol style. So there's one really easy way to do this, and it's by doing something called hue and saturation. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to pick this first image over here, pick this layer, and then I'm going to click Image, Adjustments, and then Hue and Saturation. And then we have this little window that pops up here. So this little window has a lot of cool things that it can do. And one of the main ones is it changes the hue. So see, now I went from looking pretty normal to now I have blue skin and red sunglasses. So picking images with 2 contrasting colors is a really great way to get this effect. So I kind of like this blue and red combination. So I'm going to hit OK. Then for my next image, I'm going to click on this layer, then go Image, Adjustments, hue and saturation. So this time, let's do something a little different. How about we do, I kind of like this yellow with the blue sunglasses. I think that looks pretty cool. So I'm gonna go hit OK. So next, we're gonna go to our bottom left corner image and hit Image, Adjustments, Hue and Saturation. And why don't we go for this kind of purpley reddish color with the green sunglasses. And then for our very last one, we're going to do the same thing, Image, Adjustments, Hue and Saturation. And why don't we go for a little green with purple sunglasses. All right, great. So now this is looking pretty good, but I think we can make it a little better. One of the things that we can do to heighten our images is adding an image layer on top. So what we're going to do is click Layer, New Adjustment Layer, and I'm going to pick Curves. So the cool thing about curves is you can increase the highlights and the shadows in your image to create more contrast and add more light to your image. So what we're going to do is click on this line and sort of adjust to figure out what we kind of like. So I'm just going to play around with it a little bit until I get something a little more to my taste. All right, so I think I'm going to make it a little bit like that. All right, so let's see what we had before and now what we have after. So now that we've added a little bit more light to our image, one of the other things we can do is add a little bit more color to make these colors stand out a little more. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to hit Layer, New Adjustment Layer, and then I'm going to click on Vibrance and hit OK. So with the Vibrance layer, what we can do is make these colors stand out a little bit more by adding some more vibrance and a little bit more saturation. So now see how these colors are popping out a lot more and standing out. So we get that sharper contrast and a little bit more striking look to it. So I'm just going to add a little bit more. Okay, so let's see what we had before. It's kind of faded, it doesn't stand out as much, but with just 2 layers of adjustment, we suddenly have something much brighter and much more fun to look at. So now that we have our colors kind of set a little bit more how we want it, another way we can make our images pop is by adding a drop shadow to make each individual square look as if it's popping out. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to click on this layer called Rectangle 1, which is the rectangle, or well, the square in this case, that's holding in this image. And I'm going to hit FX, and I'm going to choose Drop Shadow. So with a drop shadow, what I like to do is I like to put the drop shadow angle at 120 degrees because that's a really great natural angle that our eyes like to understand sunlight. And then what I'm going to do is make the distance 10, the spread 5, and the size 10. And then something you can play a little bit around with is the contour. So here's the normal contour. Here's the Gaussian contour, which I personally like a lot, so I'm going to go with that. And then I'm going to hit OK. So now this box is popping out so much more. And if you compare it to the others, it definitely creates a really cool, interesting look to it. So next I'm going to do this to all the other 3. So I'm going to hit FX, Drop Shadow, and because our settings are the same as before, it's going to stand out. So I'm going to hit OK. Oh, whoops. See, this is something that you have to watch out for. You can't apply the drop shadow to the image. You have to apply it to the rectangle. So I just did that. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to Control Z, undo it, then click the rectangle, FX, drop shadow. And see, there it is. Now it's popping out. So make sure it's really important that you're putting any of the effects around the rectangle, not the image, because otherwise your effects won't show up. So FX, drop shadow, OK. FX, drop shadow, OK. And there you go. That's all there is to it.